A clip that shook. The NBA, stop what you are doing, because the NBA just got hit with the kind of story that can turn an entire offseason upside down. A clip is spreading across the internet right now, and it has basketball fans arguing everywhere. Some people are laughing at the irony, some people are calling it a disaster waiting to happen, and some people are saying this might be the exact kind of tension that turns a good team into a dangerous one. At the center of all of it are two names that already carry years of playoff history: physical battles, trash talk, frustration, and respect. Jaylen Brown and Joel Embiid. And here is what makes this story so wild. Jaylen Brown, the former Boston Celtics star, the Finals MVP, the player who helped bring another championship banner to one of the most historic franchises in basketball, has now been traded to the Philadelphia 76ers. That move alone would have shocked the league. But this is not just about a superstar changing teams. This is about where he is going, who he is joining, and what he said before he got there. Because Jaylen Brown is now walking into the same locker room as Joel Embiid, the same player he recently called out in front of the basketball world. Not through a quiet rumor, not through a hidden report, not through some soft answer that could be explained away later. Brown said it directly. He gave Embiid his respect first, calling him one of the best big men in basketball history. But then he added the line that nobody forgot. He said Embiid flops. And once that sentence hit the internet, it did not disappear. It waited. It turned into a clip. It turned into a debate. It turned into fuel for every fan who already believed there was something deeper between these two. Then the trade happened. Suddenly, that old comment was no longer just a heated opinion after a playoff loss. It became the first major question of the new Philadelphia 76ers era. How do two stars go from battling each other, criticizing each other, and carrying years of rivalry into suddenly chasing the same championship? That is what makes this partnership so dangerous and so fascinating. Brown brings championship experience, Embiid brings MVP level dominance, Tyrese Maxey brings speed, scoring, and energy. On paper, Philadelphia looks terrifying, but basketball is not played on paper. It is played in locker rooms, in pressure moments, in late game huddles, and in the quiet conversations nobody gets to hear. So now the entire league is watching. Can Jaylen Brown and Joel Embiid turn old tension into championship fire, or is this the kind of partnership that looks powerful from the outside but cracks the moment pressure hits? Before we go deeper, tell me where you are watching from. If you believe Brown and Embiid can make this work, comment 1. If you think this experiment's going to fall apart, comment 2. And make sure you subscribe, because this story is only getting started. The trade that changed everything. The trade itself was already big enough to shake the league. Jaylen Brown leaving Boston was not supposed to happen like this. Not after everything he had built there. Not after the playoff battles, the criticism, the championship, the Finals MVP, and the years of being one half of the most important duo in modern Celtics basketball. For almost a decade, Brown was not just another star in Boston. He was part of the identity. So when the deal finally hit, it felt bigger than a roster move. Boston was not simply sending away a high-level wing. They were sending away a player who had grown inside their system, survived their pressure, lifted their banner, and proved he could win on the biggest stage. That kind of player does not get moved without leaving a mark. But Philadelphia saw something different. They saw a chance. For years, the 76ers had been searching for the right player to put next to Joel Embiid. They tried star power. They tried playmaking. They tried shooting. They tried size. They tried big names that looked perfect in headlines but never quite fit when the pressure got real. Every time the playoffs arrived, something broke. A role disappeared. A body failed. A partnership cracked. This time, Philadelphia did not want another experiment that only looked good in July. They wanted someone who had already been through the fire. Jaylen Brown gave them that. He gave them championship experience. He gave them toughness. He gave them a wing who could defend, score, run in transition, attack the rim, survive playoff pressure, and stand in front of the cameras without looking overwhelmed by the moment. But the cost was massive. Philadelphia was not just adding talent. They were accepting pressure. They were taking on expectations. They were putting Brown, Embiid, and Tyrese Maxey together and telling the basketball world that this was no longer about patience. This was no longer about development. This was no longer about waiting for the perfect year. This was about winning now. And that is why the deal feels so dangerous. Because when a team makes a move like this, there is no quiet version of the season that follows. Every game becomes a test. Every loss becomes a question. Every awkward moment becomes a story. Every conversation between Brown and Embiid becomes something fans try to decode. Boston chose a new direction. Philadelphia chose a championship gamble. And Jaylen Brown suddenly became the bridge between a proud past and a very uncertain future. Jaylen Brown's road from doubt to champion. To understand why this trade hit so hard, you have to understand what Jaylen Brown meant before the trade ever happened. He was never the easiest story to explain. When Boston drafted him, not everybody was convinced. Some people saw the athleticism, the strength, the intelligence, the defensive tools, and the explosive upside. Others saw a player who was still raw, still developing, still trying to turn physical gifts into consistent NBA production. In a city like Boston, patience is never guaranteed. Every missed shot gets judged. Every bad game gets remembered. Every young player is compared to the legends who came before him. But Brown kept growing. Year after year, he added something. He became stronger with the ball. He became more confident attacking the rim. He improved as a shooter. He learned how to defend elite wings. He started to understand when to force the issue and when to let the game come to him. Slowly, the raw prospect became a serious two-way threat. Then Jason Tatum arrived, and everything changed. The two of them became the face of Boston's future. Sometimes it looked perfect. Sometimes it looked complicated. There were questions about balance, leadership, shot selection, late game decisions, and whether two young wings could really carry a franchise with championship expectations. But through all the noise, Brown kept showing up. He took criticism. He absorbed pressure. He dealt with being doubted, even when his numbers improved. He dealt with the feeling that no matter how good he became, people were always ready to ask if Boston should trade him, replace him, or build around someone else. Then came the moment that changed his legacy forever, the championship run. Brown did not just participate in that run. He defined it. He played with force. He defended with pride. He attacked matchups. He hit big shots. He carried himself like a player who had spent years hearing every doubt and decided to answer all of them at once. When Boston won the title, Brown became more than a star. He became a champion, and when he won Finals MVP, it created a new version of him. Not the prospect, not the second option, not the player people debated on sports shows. A proven winner, a player with hardware, scars, and credibility. That is what Philadelphia is getting. But that is also what makes the fit so complicated. Because Brown knows what it feels like to win. He knows what it feels like to be trusted. He knows what it feels like to be the player who answers the biggest questions. And now he is stepping into a new city where he must prove all of that again, beside a superstar he once battled like an enemy. Joel Embiid and the pressure of legacy? Joel Embiid is one of the most talented big men basketball has ever seen. That part is not really a debate. At his best, he is almost impossible to guard. He can punish defenders in the post, face up from the mid-range, draw contact, hit jumpers, pass out of pressure, protect the rim, and completely bend a defense toward him. When he is healthy and locked in, the entire game changes around his body, his touch, and his presence. But greatness in the NBA is never judged by talent alone. That is where the pressure starts. Embiid has the individual resume. He has the awards. He has the dominant nights. He has the numbers that make people stop and stare. He has carried Philadelphia through regular seasons where he looked like the most unstoppable player in the world. But every spring, the same question comes back. Where is the deep playoff run? That question follows him because the standard for players like Embiid is different. When you are that talented, people do not only ask what you can do in January, they ask what happens in May. They ask what happens when the defense tightens, when the whistle changes, when every possession becomes a test of patience and pain. Philadelphia has tried to solve this problem so many times. Different co-stars, different styles, different personalities, different versions of hope. Some players were supposed to bring defense, some were supposed to bring shooting. Some were supposed to bring playmaking. Some were supposed to bring veteran calm. But every version ended with the same empty feeling. Another playoff exit. Another summer of questions. Another conversation about whether Embiid's era in Philadelphia would ever become more than individual brilliance, surrounded by team disappointment. That is why Jaylen Brown matters so much. Brown is not arriving as a young player who still needs to learn what winning looks like. He has already seen the top of the mountain. He has already played under championship pressure. He has already answered questions that Embiid is still trying to silence. And that creates a fascinating dynamic. Embiid is still the face of Philadelphia. He is still the center of the system. He is still the player. Everything bends around, but Brown walks in with something Embiid does not have yet. A championship ring and a finals MVP that can create respect. It can also create tension. Because when two powerful careers meet at this stage, the question is never just about talent. It is about ego, sacrifice, trust, and whether both men are willing to accept what the team needs more than what their pride wants. The rivalry that never really ended. The history between Boston and Philadelphia is not just background noise. It is part of the story. The Celtics and the 76ers have spent years turning ordinary basketball games into emotional battles. When those two teams meet, the arena feels different. The fans are louder, the fouls feel harder, the benches react faster. Every run feels personal. Every whistle feels suspicious. Every star matchup feels like it carries something bigger than one night. Jaylen Brown lived inside that rivalry. Joel Embiid did too. For years, Brown was one of the players standing in Philadelphia's way. He was not always the loudest name in the matchup, but he was always there, defending, attacking, running the floor, making Embiid work, and giving Boston the kind of wing toughness that becomes priceless in playoff basketball. And Embiid was always the problem Boston had to solve. He was bigger than everyone, stronger than almost everyone, skilled enough to punish double teams, and patient enough to make defenders panic. Every time Philadelphia faced Boston, the question was simple. Could the Celtics survive Embiid long enough to win the series? For a long time, the answer was yes. That is what made the rivalry painful for Philadelphia. They had the MVP-level big man. They had the star power. They had the home crowds. They had belief. But Boston always seemed to have just enough composure, just enough defensive versatility, and just enough late-game execution to leave Philadelphia frustrated. Brown was part of that frustration. He fought through screens. He absorbed contact. He attacked mismatches. He gave Boston a physical edge that did not always show up in one highlight, but mattered over 7 games. And when players battle like that long enough, respect forms. But respect does not mean comfort. It means memory. Embiid remembers who stood in his way. Brown remembers every hard possession, every whistle, every collapse, every roar from the crowd, every moment when Philadelphia tried to break Boston, and Boston refused. Then the script flipped. Philadelphia finally knocked Boston out. The loss hit hard because it happened in the kind of series that changes how players see each other. Brown was still processing it when he spoke openly about officiating, physicality, and flopping. He did not speak like someone reading from a safe public statement. He spoke like a competitor still carrying the heat of defeat. That is why the comment mattered. It came from history. It came from pain. It came from years of playoff battles finally boiling into one sentence that would later follow him into his new locker room. The comment that came back like a storm. The most dangerous comments are the ones that feel honest in the moment. That is what happened with Jaylen Brown. After the playoff loss, emotions were still fresh. The season had ended. Boston had been knocked out. The disappointment was still sitting on his shoulder. Brown went live and spoke the way players sometimes speak when the cameras feel less formal, when the setting feels more personal, and when the wound is still open. He talked about the game. He talked about the way it was called. He talked about the frustration of defending a player like Joel Embiid, a player whose size, strength, footwork, and ability to draw contact can turn every possession into a battle with the officials as much as with the opponent. Then Brown said the line that changed everything. He respected Embiid first. That part matters. He did not call him a bad player. He did not deny his greatness. He said Embiid was one of the best big men in basketball history, but then he said Embiid flops, and he said it like it was obvious. That is what made the comment stick. It was not said as a joke. It was not buried inside a vague complaint about the league. It was direct. It was personal. It was attached to a name. And because it came from a player who had just battled Embiid in a playoff series, it carried weight. Fans reacted immediately. Some agreed with Brown, some defended Embiid, some said it was just playoff frustration. Others said Brown had finally said what many people had been thinking. The debate moved through the basketball community, and for a while, it looked like just another heated offseason argument. Then the trade happened. That changed the meaning of everything. Suddenly, the comment was not just a past criticism. It became a future problem. Brown was no longer talking about an opponent from a distance. He was about to share a locker room with the same man he had called out. He was about to practice with him, travel with him, take the floor with him, and chase a championship with him. That is why this story refuses to go away. Because the basketball world understands how awkward this can become. The first time Brown and Embiid sit together at Media Day, the question will be there. The first time they run a pick and roll, people will watch their body language. The first time Philadelphia loses a close game, people will wonder whether the tension is real. Brown's comment did not create the entire story, but it lit the fuse. And now Philadelphia has to make sure the fire heats the team instead of burning it down. The first day in Philadelphia, imagine Jaylen Brown walking into the Philadelphia facility for the first time, not as a rival, not as the player wearing Boston green, not as the guy trying to silence the crowd. This time, he walks in as a 76er. That alone feels strange. Brown spent years trying to beat this franchise. He knew the hostility, the noise, the pressure, and the playoff tension. Now, the same city that once wanted him to fail is supposed to believe he can help bring them a championship. But the real moment is not the logo on the floor. It is Joel Embiid. At some point, Brown has to stand across from the same player he publicly called a flopper. Maybe it happens in the locker room, maybe it happens on the practice court, maybe it happens in a quiet hallway before cameras are even rolling. But no matter where it happens, The question will be sitting there. Did they talk about it? Philadelphia cannot ignore that forever. Brown can say it was competition. Embiid can say he moved on. The team can say everything is fine, but fans will still watch every handshake, every huddle, every look, and every short answer for signs of tension. That is what happens when rivals become teammates overnight. Still, there is another side to this. Brown and Embiid already know each other's toughness. Brown knows how dominant Embiid can be because he had to defend him. Embiid knows Brown is not soft because he watched him fight through years of playoff battle. That kind of history can create awkward, but it can also create respect. Philadelphia does not need Brown and Embiid to be best friends. They need them to trust each other when the game is close, when the crowd is loud, and when the pressure starts squeezing the locker room. If they talk honestly early, this can work. But if they pretend nothing happened, the silence could become louder than the comment itself. And that is why the first day matters. Can this big three actually work? Drama get attention. Basketball decides the truth. The biggest question in Philadelphia is not just whether Jaylen Brown and Joel Embiid can move past the tension. It is whether Brown, Embiid, and Tyrese Maxey can actually work together on the floor. On paper, the talent is dangerous. Embiid gives them dominance inside, Maxey gives them speed, shooting, and energy. Brown gives them defense, power, transition, scoring, and championship experience. That sounds like a contender, but fit is not automatic. All three players need the ball. Embiid has been the center of Philadelphia's offense for years. Maxey has grown into a star. Brown just proved he can carry a team as a top option. If the offense becomes three stars taking turns, problems will show up fast. The spacing will shrink, the rhythm will break, the frustration will grow. But if Philadelphia builds it the right way, the upside is huge. Embiid draws double teams. That opens driving lanes for Brown. Maxey's speed stretches the defense. Brown can attack closeouts, run the floor, defend elite wings, and punish teams when they focus too much on Embiid. That is why this fit is so interesting. Brown does not need every possession to run through him to be dangerous. He can impact the game with defense, cuts, transition, and timely scoring, but he still has to feel respected in the system. Embiid may have to trust possessions that do not start with him. Maxey may have to balance aggression with patience. Brown may have to accept that some nights his role will look different than it did in Boston. That is the sacrifice championship teams require. Philadelphia does not need perfect comfort. They need rhythm, trust, and shared purpose. If they find that, this big three can scare the East. If they do not, the talent will only make the collapse louder. Legacy, pressure, and the risk of collapse. This partnership does not carry the same pressure for everyone. Jaylen Brown arrives in Philadelphia with a championship already on his resume. He has a ring, he has a finals MVP, he has already proven he can win under the brightest lights. If this works, his legacy grows. If it fails, people will criticize the fit, the trade, or the chemistry. But they cannot erase what he already did in Boston. For Joel Embiid, the pressure is heavier. He does not need another dominant regular season. He does not need another stretch of huge scoring nights. Everyone already knows how talented he is. What he needs is the playoff run, the conference finals appearance, the finals stage, the moment that finally changes the conversation around his career. That is why Brown's arrival matters so much. Brown brings something Philadelphia has been missing: championship credibility. He knows what it takes in June. He knows how small mistakes become huge in the playoffs. He knows how to win when every possession feels like a test, but that also removes excuses. If Philadelphia fails now, the questions will be louder than ever. If the offense looks crowded, people will blame the stars. If Brown and Embiid look disconnected, people will bring up the old comment. If they lose early, this trade will be remembered as another big swing that did not work. That is the risk. Philadelphia has lived too long in the world of almost enough talent, almost the right fit, almost the breakthrough year, almost a championship team. Brown was brought in to end that cycle. But to do that, pride cannot be bigger than purpose. Embiid has to trust Brown. Brown has to embrace the challenge. Maxey has to become the connector. And the locker room has to stay together when the outside noise gets loud. If they figure it out, Philadelphia could become a real threat. If they do not, this could become one of the most explosive failed experiments in the NBA. That is the thin line the 76ers are walking now. The fire that could build or burn Philadelphia. This entire story comes down to one simple truth. Fire can build something powerful, or it can burn everything down. Jaylen Brown and Joel Embiid do not have a clean history. They have playoff battles, public comments, frustration, respect, and unfinished tension between them. But sometimes that is exactly what makes a team dangerous. Comfortable teams do not always become champions. Talented teams do not always survive pressure. The teams that win are usually the ones that learn how to turn hard conversations into trust. Philadelphia has to be honest from the beginning. Brown and Embiid cannot pretend the comment never happened. The front office cannot act like the media will forget it. The coaching staff cannot allow every practice, every loss, and every late game possession to become a guessing game about chemistry. They need clarity. They need roles. They need communication. Most importantly, they need both stars to understand that this is bigger than pride. Strategically, the 76ers have three major priorities. First, they must define the offense early. Embiid cannot be left wondering when Brown will attack. Brown cannot be left standing around, feeling like a decorated champion turned into an accessory. Maxey cannot be pushed into the shadow. The system has to create rhythm for all three. Second, they must protect the locker room. Outside, noise will be loud. Fans will overreact. Clips will be analyzed. Every expression will become a story. Philadelphia has to keep the real conversations inside the building and make sure the players trust each other more than they trust the noise. Third, they must stay healthy and patient. A partnership like this does not become perfect in 1 week. There will be awkward possessions, there will be tough losses, there will be nights when one star gets more shots than the others. The key is whether they respond like professionals or let frustration grow. The lesson here is bigger than basketball. Sometimes the person you once battled can become the person who helps you reach the next level. Sometimes old tension can become respect. Sometimes winning requires people to put ego aside, speak honestly, forgive quickly, and choose a common goal over personal pride. That is the human side of this. Brown does not need to erase his past with Boston. Embiid does not need to pretend criticism never happened. They simply need to meet each other with maturity, respect, and a shared understanding that championships are built by people who can handle uncomfortable truths without turning them into war. So now the question belongs to you. Do you believe Jaylen Brown and Joel Embiid can turn this fire into a championship run? Or do you think Philadelphia just created the most explosive experiment in the NBA? Comment 1 if you believe this can work. Comment 2 if you think it will fall apart. And if you want more NBA stories like this, make sure you subscribe, like the video, and share it with another basketball fan.